campuses, we do have the flipped model, but they still have the adaptive also, right? So they have both things. And when we brought it to the flipped classroom, there was again this design watch I mean and watch and watch, but it was successful because of the model of calibrate, watch it, and then we launch it full when we have found the right levers, if you will, the right combination. That's when we launch it full.
So focusing on faculty, I find in my work at the higher ed that while we have many experts, most of these experts have very little pedagogical knowledge and therefore lack design knowledge using pedagogy. So I'm a believer of this backward design. So could you talk a little bit the process that maybe you work with professors to help them actually start with that end in mind and how we break it down further until we can put it in nodes or chunks?
Sure, sure. So I'm a big believer in the backward design too. And you heard me with the marketing plan, what do you need to know so that we can walk up to it. So with our non-adaptive, we've used the backward design for years, right? Okay, so the first thing that's designed are the assignments, right? And then what is the support to do those assignments? So with the adaptive, it is the same thing, right? We start with those bigger concepts and we're going to break them down, right? We start with the course objectives, which move to a course outline, right? And that's the big picture, right? And then what do you need to know to fulfill or to learn this item on that course outline? Tell me everything you need to know. And then they start to name all these things. Well, that's how you get your granular content. That's how you get the personalization and the little pieces of knowledge gaps that students might have. So there are some key questions, but the backward design is very important for, and you can move, my presentation at OLC Innovate was exactly this. Let's move from the known to the unknown, right? So the known is course objectives and the course outline, and every faculty is very comfortable with those two things, right? And when you look at the course outline, for my example was in Unit 2 algebra, there were like 6 things in that course outline. Okay, so now tell me everything I need to know for each of those 6 things. That bloomed into 11 things, and those were your notes, right, for Unit 2. So that's how you get to where you're going, right? So, but the thing is you have to look at what do they need to know at the end. The terminal nodes are very important, right? Where are we going with it? And tell me everything you need to know to get to the terminal nodes in a learning map. So,
but and I'd like to add to that facilitation, and equally as important, different than Judy's world, but my world is making sure then facilitation occurs. And what we have found, and I say this and I'm going to look into the camera and say, this is the truth, that faculty engagement is key.
Yes.
For this technology. And so that it is so important for faculty to, this isn't plug and play. This is, you've got to use the tool, look at the tool. But what we have found, which is really fun, is that faculty love the tool. And I would attribute some of that to the tool itself, to the design, but also to the support that we provide faculty along the way. It's not just a training and, oh, good luck. We do support them and provide additional training and coaching and sort of so that then they say, I love this.
So on that line of thinking, could you help our viewers, our learners to understand this model of support that you guys have established and find it to be very successful? Maybe if you could think about a particular professor or individual that you know you've worked with, and maybe just sort of walk through how you have done that on that individual basis.
Sure, and you know an example I'll give is our math example, Judy, our algebra. When and this had to do with implementing a flip model in our Colorado campuses, and we had introduced adaptive learning to a group of faculty. This is pre-engineering courses, so it's that kind of math. Judy can probably name the 3 courses. It's trigonometry, advanced calculus,
analytical trigonometry.
Okay, I knew she could.
Yeah,
right. But they were not total believers, and so they worked with us on the maps. And I think that what we did is we stayed engaged with them. and explained along the way. And then what happened is the maps didn't work as they thought they should. And it was their content, but it didn't play out in the classroom as they thought it should. And so what we did and what Judy did then was spend a lot of time with them. You might talk about that to recalibrate the maps that she's talking about, tweaking along the way to understand the technology because sometimes what faculty will say is, it doesn't work, it must be broken. And what we engage with them in is, I saw you smile, so you know that's a truth, as well, I think, or at least our truth. What we say is, okay, let's go through it. And so maybe you could explain what you did with the faculty then.
Sure. So they all had kind of a concept on how this was going to work, and they weren't all the same, right? So when they were sending in things, what we found is they were sending in each other's things to say, this is a, so what we had to do is say, how are we teaching analytical trigonometry at CTU, right? So we brought, I think, 5 people together, and we said, none of this is wrong, but you need an approach, right? Because otherwise there were 23 different answers to the same thing, right? They were like, no, I teach it like that. No. So we brought together 5 math gurus, if you will, and they went through everything and they came up with an approach. Sometimes they pick Nikki's approach, sometimes they pick Connie's, but it's a question of how are we teaching math at CTU. Once we did that, all the maps functioned exactly how they should, and they were all, the questions went away, right? So again, if you need to decide that, even if we weren't doing adaptive, it still would be what are we going to do? Because when you have individual instructors, they're all going to maybe want to present it a little bit, and that's fine to present things in a different way. But at the end of the day, you need to say, how are we teaching analytical trigonometry at CTU?
So if a university is interested in adapting a particular subject area or course that maybe, they're struggling to get the type of success rate, and maybe it's a gateway course, whatever the case may be, that university determines that it's essential or important. So you don't just take one professor. You try to bring them all in, you get them all on the same page, and they all come to an agreement on the approach. So universities that are piloting, and typically they're piloting with only one course, is it essential then that even though they're just, let's say, one professor has agreed to run this in their course for the pilot, you still agree that you would bring all these professors that teach that course in to the conversation?
Well, and I'll take that because sometimes we're running 25 sections of a course.
Okay.
And because we have a large population, and so we can't necessarily bring all faculty, but what we would do is share data from the section. We also, at the beginning, and I write about this in the article too, we found that there were faculty who loved this and became our champions. And I know it's really a common approach to have champions, but it's so true that there were certain faculty who had, and Tanya Troka is one of them, at the beginning, who really saw the success in this, and then she became advocating force to the general education faculty in math. And so, again, it could be groups, as we did in this case, because it was at a ground campus, it was a flipped classroom. There were some folks who were physically geolocated together, but it also can be that we have, faculty success that then they become the champion within the group. And again, that's where this flexibility is important, or it has been for us, as to how we implement this in the various colleges at CTU. And I do want to make one other point. Each college has the ability to implement adaptive in their courses or not. We do not prescribe where it needs to be. And so that's why we have adaptive in just over 100 courses.
Yeah.
But we have 800 courses that we run. And so I think the numbers that we have are large, certainly with those students that run through it because of our population, but in actuality, we have implemented it in a small percentage of courses, which I know is different than some institutions that you've talked to too that are trying a more programmatic approach. Now, I will say we are working toward a programmatic approach in nursing, And you might want to talk about why we decided to do it that way. This is faculty driven too.
Right. So I would say in nursing, engineering, and computer science, we're working more towards that programmatic approach, right? And they're each doing it a little bit different. They're not approach, but a programmatic approach is actually a really great way to do it. And so you know the end goal there, right? And you can also, when we talk about backward design, you have the industry standards there, you have the program outcomes there, so you can build. And so, I mean, that's perfect for adaptive because you want to build from class to class. So the knowledge is measured throughout the whole program, not just in an individual class that way, right? Yeah.
So can we look at this 30,000 feet above and let's think on a really big potential?
Mm-hmm.
Across the university, sister organizations, maybe community colleges that feed into. Could we potentially have a student who is in a hard sciences course and they are moving up and they're beginning to need more difficult math, and maybe it's been a year or two since they've had that math. If the math program is also adapted, couldn't we provide an across the campus program? I guess my vision is that if a student begins to struggle or have forgotten some information from, say, trigonometry, and if the math program was adapted, could we not support that and remediate that loss of retention?
We do. It's called Unit Zero.
Unit Zero. Could you tell us more about that?
So Unit Zero is it's accessible but not assigned. Okay, it's part of a map, and it's that background. It's that information that is necessary. When they first go into their first unit and they do what's called the determined knowledge, which builds their map. If they score low on that determined knowledge, it will pull what is needed from